I used to believe in systems, that if you worked hard, stayed late, followed the rules, and never rocked the boat, you'd be rewarded. Not immediately, maybe not even fairly, but eventually. I held on to that belief like a religion until the day it all collapsed. Until the day they made me the villain in a story I never wrote. I worked at Iron Crest Solutions for nearly 12 years. I started off answering phones in customer service, worked my way up to project coordinator, and then to senior logistics manager. I didn't come from money or connections. I earned everything by burning the midnight oil, giving up weekends, and swallowing more pride than any man should. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stability. And in a world that feels like it's constantly tilting, stability is the one thing I thought I had a grip on. Then came the audit. 2 months before they fired me, a financial discrepancy was found in our department. A routine review, they called it. Something minor. I wasn't worried. I knew my records were clean. I had every invoice logged, every shipment tracked, every client confirmation filed in triplicate. Still, they wanted a few interviews, just questions, just protocol. At first, it was nothing, typical corporate bureaucracy. But then the tone shifted. The meetings got longer. The questions became sharper. I noticed how my coworkers stopped talking when I walked into the break room. Emails got strangely formal. My access to certain files was revoked. And then came the day. It was a Wednesday, midweek, harmless, or so I thought. I was called into HR. Dana from compliance sat across from me with a thick file. My manager, George, who I had trained years ago, stood behind her like a scared little boy. They accused me of authorizing duplicate vendor payments and altering delivery logs. Fraud. Theft. My first reaction was laughter. I thought it was a joke, some twisted mistake. But their faces didn't move. No cracks, no doubt. They were going through the motions like it was already decided. Like this was theater, and I was the only one who hadn't read the script. I denied everything, of course. I offered to show them my records, my logs, even personal notes. But they'd already decided. The investigation was thorough, they said. And just like that, I was escorted out of the building like a criminal. 12 years gone. No severance, no letter of recommendation. Just a cold, rehearsed, "We wish you the best." But the worst part wasn't the firing. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was what came after. Whispers in my industry. Clients I'd worked with for years stopped returning my calls. Recruiters went silent. My professional reputation obliterated overnight. The company had spun a quiet story about me being under internal review for compliance breaches. In our world, that's code for, "Don't touch him, he's toxic." I fell into a hole I didn't know how to climb out of. I stopped shaving, stopped answering texts. I watched my savings bleed out slowly. Rent, food, insurance, legal fees for a lawyer who eventually told me, "You can't sue a corporation without concrete proof." But here's the thing. I had proof. I spent weeks reviewing everything I had access to. Old drive backups, email archives, notes. I found things, emails between George and Dana, that were way too friendly for colleagues. Project edits in shared documents that were time-stamped when I wasn't even in the building. Vendor invoices that were rerouted to new addresses under George's supervision. The pieces didn't just suggest a setup, they screamed it. And still, no one would listen. So I stopped trying to prove I was innocent, and I started planning something else. Something better. You know what they say. If the system won't give you justice, sometimes you have to take it. At first, I didn't know what revenge looked like. I didn't want violence. That's messy and stupid. I wanted precision. I wanted them to feel exposed, vulnerable, powerless, like I did. So I followed them. I mean that literally. I tracked their routines, their schedules, who they met for drinks, where they parked, what time they left the office, what gyms they used, what cafes they liked to sit in. For weeks, I became their shadow. And you'd be surprised how careless people are when they think they've won. George, he had a little side hustle going, consulting on competitors' projects under a fake name. Dana, she was leaking quarterly projections to a hedge fund for stock tips. And the new guy they brought in to replace me, he was using the company credit card to buy personal electronics. Funny how fast the dominoes start falling once you know where to push. But this wasn't just about collecting dirt. It was about timing, precision, patience. I wasn't going to just ruin them. I was going to watch them unravel piece by piece. Because I'm not the villain they made me out to be. I'm just the man they shouldn't have betrayed. People think revenge is loud. Screaming, breaking things, blowing up in a fit of rage. But real revenge? It's quiet. It's calculated. It whispers while everyone else is shouting. It smiles while others sleep. After gathering the dirt on George, Dana, and the rest of the corporate rats that threw me to the wolves, I didn't act immediately. I studied, waited, let the pressure simmer. Because I wasn't just after revenge, I was after justice. My kind of justice. I started with George. I knew he had a second identity, Greg Thomas, used for consulting on competitors' logistics projects. Illegal, obviously, especially with the non-compete clause in his Ironcrest contract. I traced payments through a proxy account he thought was secure. I compiled invoices, emails, even voice messages he'd left with a vendor. One of those vendors, an old contact of mine, owed me a favor. He was more than willing to forward me everything he had once I explained what George had done to me. Once I had enough, I sent the evidence, anonymously, to Ironcrest's board of directors and their legal department. Not from some throwaway email either. I built a fake profile that looked like it belonged to a concerned mid-level analyst. It had a full fake resume, LinkedIn profile, and a believable writing style that sounded like someone barely keeping their conscience together. George was suspended 2 days later. Full-blown internal investigation. He claimed innocence, said he was set up. Sound familiar? They didn't fire him yet. Number. They put him under administrative review. I know that line well. It's the first step in the corporate execution process. You die slowly. You rot while everyone whispers behind your back. Next was Dana. She was trickier, smarter. She kept her dealings clean, on the surface, but I found her weakness. An anonymous tip to the SEC claimed a senior compliance officer at Ironcrest had been feeding confidential reports to a hedge fund manager. I attached screenshots of her Slack messages, wire transfers to a newly created account in the Cayman Islands, and a photo of her with the fund manager at a private event. Again, it didn't come from me, it came from a fake ex-boyfriend, complete with a burner number, social media footprint, and insider remorse narrative. 2 weeks later, Dana's face was all over the internal employee forum. Suspended pending federal inquiry. Ironcrest sent a company-wide email claiming they were cooperating with authorities. 2 down. Then there was Kevin, the guy they brought in to replace me. The one who used the corporate card like it was a personal piggy bank. I didn't even have to dig for him. The guy was sloppy. I pulled his receipts from public Git repositories where he accidentally uploaded company expense data while working on a shared project. Idiot. I created an anonymous employee ethics account and posted everything to the Ironcrest internal feedback portal. It went viral within the company in under 6 hours. Memes, jokes, even a spreadsheet tracking his purchases. A week later, he was gone. But revenge wasn't the end goal. It was just a means. Because while they were crumbling, I was rebuilding. I started consulting under a new name, Miles Preston. Sounds classy, doesn't it? I built a clean portfolio, created a small website, posted articles, and reached out to clients I hadn't talked to since the fallout. The ones who believed me. The ones who were secretly glad someone was exposing the rot. I got offers, small ones at first, then bigger. Ironcrest's reputation began to waver. 3 managers gone, legal probes, the board in panic mode, investors nervous. I knew the press would catch on eventually. They always do. But I wasn't done yet, because the final blow needed to be personal. I scheduled a meeting with Ironcrest's CEO, pretending to be a representative from a firm looking to acquire some of their failing projects. I wore a suit, cut my hair, used a voice slightly deeper than mine, just different enough. And I told him a story, not the full one, just enough. How companies rot from the inside. How the most dangerous enemies are the ones they make themselves. How betrayal always finds its way home. He didn't recognize me, not right away. But as I left the building, I turned around and said, "You should be more careful who you trust. After all, look what happened to me." That was the moment. His eyes, the flicker of recognition, the twitch in his jaw. It was perfect. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. But me? I prefer it slow-cooked, layered with irony, and served right back to the table that cast me out. I walked away from Ironcrest for the last time, not as a victim, not even as a villain, but as the ghost they thought they buried. And I wasn't done yet. It was Clara's eyes that haunted me the most. Not the headlines, not the chaos I had stirred, but the look she gave me at that cafe. A mixture of betrayal, understanding, and pity. The folder she handed me still sat untouched on my nightstand, like a time bomb I hadn't yet dared to open. But I wasn't done, not yet. Charles Wexley, the CEO, was still holding on. Publicly disgraced, yes, but not destroyed. And I couldn't stomach the idea that the man who had profited off my downfall could still walk into a boardroom, raise a glass, and toast to the next quarter. So I began phase 2. Ironcrest had always prided itself on its spotless image. Clean numbers, clean culture, clean conscience. But I knew where the bodies were buried. Figuratively, of course. I'd been part of the inner machine long enough to see how things really worked. Insider trading whispers, misuse of employee benefits, hidden payouts to silence whistleblowers. I didn't just know these things. I had proof. I sent anonymous packages to shareholders, journalists, and corporate watchdogs. Every envelope was meticulously prepared. No fingerprints, no direct ties, just the raw truth wrapped in silence. The media storm that followed made the first one look like a drizzle. Stock plummeted, board members resigned. The SEC launched a formal investigation. And Charles Wexley? He disappeared. Some said he fled the country. Others believed he checked into rehab. I didn't care. As long as his name became a cautionary tale, whispered in the halls of corporate greed, my job was done. But there was something else, something I hadn't expected. Sympathy. Not just from strangers, but from ex-colleagues. People who had once avoided me in the halls now sent anonymous messages of gratitude. They too had been chewed up and spit out by the machine. I had become something of a myth, the man who brought Ironcrest down. It should have felt victorious. It didn't. I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the window, expecting black cars to roll up. My phone rang with unknown numbers at night. My heart raced with every knock at the door. The justice I had longed for had turned into a prison of paranoia. And Clara, she hadn't stayed silent. I found out she had given a statement, anonymously, of course, but enough to point the authorities in my direction, not out of vengeance, not even out of fear. I think, in her own way, she was trying to save me, to stop me before I destroyed myself. But it was too late for that. I had already sent the final piece, a flash drive to the Attorney General's office. It contained everything, every document, every recording, every line of code I had traced to prove that Ironcrest had defrauded its investors. It was the match that lit the final blaze. And now I was standing in the smoke. One morning, I walked into a diner, same one I used to visit before work, back when I had a name and a title. The waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, smiled and said, "Haven't seen you in a while, honey. You look different." I did. I had lost weight. My hair was longer, my eyes colder. But I smiled back and said, "Just passing through." As I stirred my coffee, I saw it on the TV behind her. Ironcrest execs face indictments as whistleblower evidence mounts. They didn't mention my name. They didn't need to. But I knew my time was up. Later that night, I returned to my apartment and found the envelope Clara gave me. I opened it. Inside were copies of my communications, drafts of leaked documents, timestamps, even footage from security cameras that had somehow captured me mailing the flash drives. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "You were right. They deserve to fall. But don't let their poison make you one of them. Please, stop before you become someone else's villain." Clara, I sat with that note for hours. I thought about turning myself in. I thought about disappearing. I thought about the version of me that once believed in redemption. In the end, I picked up the phone. "FBI tip line. How may I help you?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Daniel Blake. I have information you need, and I'm ready to talk." Because justice, real justice, isn't just about vengeance. It's about finally being able to look in the mirror and see a man again. It started with a letter I never sent. I wrote it a dozen times, on scraps of paper, in half-finished Word documents, in my head during sleepless nights. It always began the same. "To whom it may concern, I am sorry." But I never finished it. What was I really sorry for? For uncovering the truth? For dragging monsters into the light? Or for becoming one of them along the way? The weeks following my confession were a blur of interviews, interrogations, and ink-stained paperwork. I gave them everything: names, dates, flash drives. My apartment became a war room of evidence and guilt. The agents didn't treat me as a hero, nor did they call me a villain. I was just a tool now, a means to an end. And I accepted it. That's what I had become. The news raged with headlines. Ironcrest empire crumbles. CEO on the run. Whistleblower sparks corporate purge. I watched it all unfold from a nondescript federal safe house in upstate New York, where my days were reduced to silence and my nights were filled with regret. But justice is a strange beast. It doesn't roar, it whispers. The ones who needed to fall, fell. Charles Wexley, finally extradited, was dragged off a private jet in shackles. board members testified against each other like dominoes, toppling in a slow motion. Millions in fines, assets seized, reputations ruined. But none of it gave me peace. I had become addicted to the idea that justice would fill the emptiness inside me, that bringing them down would rebuild what they broke in me. That vengeance was transformation. I was wrong. Vengeance is a black hole. It devours everything, especially the soul of the one who seeks it. Clara visited once. She didn't say much, just sat across from me, hands folded on her lap, eyes red but kind. She didn't come for closure. She came for the truth. I gave it to her. Everything. Every step, every lie, every choice. She listened without interrupting. Then, as she stood to leave, she whispered, "You could have just walked away." I couldn't, and she knew that. What they did to me, what they took from me, wasn't just a job. It was identity, security, purpose. They stripped me bare and then mocked the bones. I had to make it mean something. That's what I told myself. And yet, sitting alone in that quiet room, I wondered, what had I built in its place? Months passed. The investigation concluded. The courts had what they needed. And me, I was offered a deal. Reduced sentence, minimal prison time, supervised release, a quiet life, a forgotten name. I accepted, not because I felt redeemed, but because I was tired of being the fire and the ashes. One morning I was escorted out of the safe house. The agent handed me a bus ticket, a new ID, and a small envelope. "From her," he said. No name, but I knew it was Clara. Inside was a photograph, an old one from a holiday party years ago. Me smiling, glass in hand, unaware of what was coming. On the back, she had written, "He wasn't perfect, but he was still good. Don't forget him." I didn't cry. I got on the bus, sat by the window, and watched the world pass by in shades of gray and gold. Somewhere between mile markers and blinking streetlights, I began to write the letter again. Only this time I finished it. To whom it may concern, my name is Daniel Blake. I once worked for a company that valued profits over people. I was fired for trying to speak up. I retaliated in ways that burned more than just bridges. I exposed the truth, and in doing so, I lost myself. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: justice without mercy is vengeance in disguise. I sought to destroy what destroyed me, but in the process, I became the smoke I tried to escape. Still, I believe people can change, not overnight, not easily, but inch by inch, with honesty